Good evening, everyone, and welcome back to our look at the history of the second generation of video game consoles. Today's entry is on the Bally Astrocade, a very interesting system that has a number of fascinating games. But before we get to the games, we of course need to look at the system itself and the stuff inside of it. But let's start with the actual system itself here. So this is the Bally Astrocade, or as you can see here, the Bally Professional Arcade. It has a somewhat interesting history, but let's first look at the system itself. So the Bally Astrocade / Professional Arcade was first marketed in the fall of 1977 as a mail order only item, but the manufacturing process was delayed, and so the system did not ship until 1978, putting its release after that of the Atari 2600 and the RCA Studio 2. So there's a lot of reasons this system might have been more successful, and one of those reasons is if it had actually shipped on time. But by the time it came out, about 6 months after the Atari 2600, things were already largely set in stone, and Bally was unable to move the needle in its direction, and eventually in around 1980 they sold the entire video game division of the company, and at that point the system was then renamed to the Astrocade and was sold for several more years, with the final games coming out in around 1983. So a decent lifespan for the system. It notably, as you can tell here, has a keypad on the front of the system with a calculator-esque setup here with mathematical signs here, up, down, percentage, and a clear button, memory, all this stuff, standard stuff you'd see on a calculator. And that is because the system had an optional cartridge you could purchase that would slide in right here, that in addition to games, of course, you would have Bally Basic, which allowed you to program your own software, and you could utilize this keypad in order to do that, and you could therefore create your own software for this system, and people did just that, and they would release the code in magazines, and other people could input that same code, and then you'd have a working game. And this was a common thing done in Europe for the microcomputer scene there, but it's rare to see in the US. You saw it a little bit with the Commodore 64, but not a common thing to see with home consoles, not with computers. So an interesting option, and the system was initially advertised as a computer when Bally released that original mail order magazine, before eventually switching over to calling it the Professional Arcade and advertising it as a game console. But the initial idea was for something more like a computer, and this did have expansion capabilities, so you could add additional control mechanisms, you could add additional memory. So there are some computer-like things about it. The hump here on the back, like in the Fairchild Channel F, is used for storage, in this case to store cartridges. So when this flips up, I don't have a picture of it flipped up, but there are cartridge holder slots in here, so you can put your cartridges here and then slide them here when you are ready to play the game. There is no door on the cartridge slot, unlike the Fairchild Channel F, so potentially something that's going to have some dust in it. If you happen to get a hold of one, you might be having to clean the connecting pins here to get this thing working. But otherwise, a decently well-built system. But definitely the most noteworthy thing, let's see if we can move this over so you can see it. Sure, you can mostly see it there, right? Okay, that is the controller. So the top knob looking like thing here can be used like a dial, so you can turn it left and right. You can also move it like a small joystick with your thumb. So like this is generally considered like the first thumbstick in existence. And then you of course had a trigger right here as your button. So not quite as many options as the Fairchild Channel F, because you could not press and pull this. But beyond that, this definitely had more options than you would find in, say, the Atari 2600 or certainly like in the RCA Studio 2. And you could, and I don't know that any games did, but you could also theoretically allow players to utilize the keypad here to control the game. But that would require you, of course, to have the console sitting on your lap. So in most cases, it was just the controller that was used for that. But the controller here, yeah, is generally one of the better received controllers of the era. An early example, like I said, of holding the joystick with your thumb and moving it that way. Although if you had to rotate it, you probably need to move your hand away from the trigger and use your other hand to pull the trigger. So it's like the Channel F, gives you a lot of options, but is a little bit awkward to use. But overall, a decent looking system with some smart design choices that gives you a decent amount of capability. Now, to talk about the system itself internally, let's go back here and set our scene as usual. If we recall, the first system, the Fairchild Channel F, was a system using Fairchild's own custom-built processor running at about 1.8 megahertz. It had 2 kilobytes of memory, and it had 64 bytes of so you had 2 kilobytes of video memory and 64 bytes of system memory. It could support resolutions of 128 by 64. So a very low resolution system, and it could support 8 colors. And the system is a decently powerful system as far as audio is concerned. It could do a lot more variation on its beeps and bloops compared to, say, the Studio 2 or the 2600, but it still is just basic bleeps and bloops. The Atari 2600, by comparison, has a playfield resolution of 160 by 192, so a bit more, although you really couldn't use that entire resolution in most cases. You generally are talking more like 40 by 192, but slightly higher resolution. Notably, it is able to produce 128 colors on screen simultaneously, so it's able to show its entire color library on screen simultaneously, and you can actually swap palettes mid-line, and it's very challenging, but you can get some really crazy color creations with the Atari 2600 using a lot of very difficult and advanced programming tricks. But in general, you're going to see only a handful of colors. The processor is an offshoot of the MOS 6502 running at only 1.2 megahertz, and there is no video memory and only 128 bytes of system memory. So a severely limiting system in some ways, but one that is very unlimited in other ways because you had no concept of video memory. You were incredibly limited because you couldn't create a frame buffer, but you also didn't have to create a frame buffer. So that lets you have far more creative solutions in how you draw the scene than was possible on any other system before or since. But the super slow processor and the lack of a frame buffer definitely limited what developers could do in a lot of different ways. Moving over to the Astrocade, then, we have a system that is decently powerful. It uses a Zilog Z80 clocked at 1.8 megahertz, so that's the same speed as the Channel F. The Z80 had some very complex instruction sets, and and that made it so that running at nearly double the clock speed of the 2600 didn't mean that it actually could perform double the calculations of the 2600. It actually was probably fairly comparable in a lot of cases. The Z80 had a lot of capability to do a lot of different things because it had a very lengthy list of stock instructions, but you had to really make good use of them to get around the length of you basically were using close to twice as many cycles to perform each instructions as you would have been on a MOS or Motorola processor. And so you really had to very smartly use the instructions that were included to get around some of those limitations. So it has the possibility of being faster, but in reality was probably actually very similarly clocked. Memory-wise, the system came with 4 kilobytes of video memory and could be expanded, as I mentioned earlier, for up to 64 kilobytes for use with homebrew programs. And from the standpoint of the screen resolution, we are looking at a maximum resolution of 320 by 204, so far and away the highest resolution possible, but that resolution was not possible with only 4 kilobytes of memory, so you would not see that on any of the official software released for the title, but you could theoretically develop a homebrew title that required the 64 kilobyte RAM expansion, and the graphics display driver was capable of running the system at 320 by 204 if it did have enough memory to handle that. So, decent options there. And then audio wise, you have 3 separate oscillators and global vibrato on the Astrocade, so the most complex set of audio capabilities that we had seen thus far in the home console era. So a fairly powerful and expandable system, not any real huge glaring oversights in its design, with the one exception of the fact that it was priced at $300. And if you recall, the Atari 2600 launched at $190, and the Fairchild Channel F launched at, I believe it was $170. Yes, $170. And the Studio 2 was $150. So this is a full double the price of the Studio 2 and over $100 more than the 2600. And that is because the Zilog Z80 was a much more expensive processor to manufacture than the MOS 6502, and the variant used in the 2600 has some of its memory interface stripped to make it even cheaper. So the MOS 6502 is noteworthy for being the first mass production processor. It is what allowed for systems like Commodore's early PET or the VIC-20 alongside like the Apple II and those systems to actually come out at a reasonable price point, was because the entire point of the MOS architecture was to take the Motorola architecture and simplify it down to its very base level, allowing you to sell each processor for only $25. That was the goal. And so that allowed the Atari to come in at a much lower price point than the Astrocade. And again, the Z80, well more versatile, and it had the potential to do more than the MOS. It certainly could, like the MOS 6502 could not come anywhere close to accessing 64 kilobytes of memory. It would not have been possible. But the Zilog Z80 can. So, it has more capabilities, but that makes it a lot more expensive of a system. It's also Intel compatible, so it could be, you could use the same code you wrote for an Intel 8080 on this. So there's a lot of noteworthy advantages to using a Z80. Very few of them useful for an actual video game console. And so I think you could make the strong argument that Midway probably made the wrong choice here in choosing the Z80 for this system. And we'll see, there are going to be other Z80 systems released later. So, but, and we'll see how they hold up in comparison, but this is a decent system from a computational standpoint, but it's overly expensive and does not give you significantly more bang for your buck as a game console, but it does allow the system to be used as a computer if you wanted to expand it. So that's the system itself. Let's now look at the games for it. So the Bally Astrocade, I know I mentioned, before we continue, I mentioned Midway a moment ago. Midway was Bally's video game division. So if I say Midway, I'm referring to the same company as Bally. Bally was a pinball manufacturer. That's what the ball comes from, a pin ball. And Midway was the name of their video game division. So the company was, for a time, even called Bally Midway. So these games will say they are generally published, as you can see here, hopefully. Let me make sure you actually can see that. This can go away now. Yes. So you can see it says developer Bally Midway. So same company, whether I say Bally or Midway. All right. So the Bally Astrocade came with 4 built-in applications, 2 video games, Gunfight and Checkmate, and 2 programs, a calculator program and a scribbling, doodling program that, we've seen come built in on every system we've looked at thus far, pretty much. And then those built-in ones, as you can see, are dated 1977, due to that being when that mail order began. But since the system did not start shipping until 1978, you'll see that all of the actual separately released titles are dated 1978 and forward. You'll note that they all use a similar visual style, keeping up with how Atari and Fairchild and even RCA to an extent tried to create a line of products that felt very similar on the shelf. I don't think that they are, again, nearly as successful as Fairchild here with this. We'll see some other really good examples going forward, but let's just say for a while, Fairchild definitely won the argument or won the battle over who was making the best box art and the best boxes for their games. They were very visually compelling, and nothing else really honestly comes especially close, but these are certainly better than RCA's attempts. So before we get into the actual games, the last thing to note is something that is actually something I could not find a lot of information on. But you'll notice that on each of the boxes, there's a number after the game, right? And for most of the games, that number begins in 200 and then 2, 3, and you can see here's 1, here's 4, and even if we go all the way down here, now we're at 10, 11, so on and so forth. It is my understanding, or at least my belief, that standard arcade games would be numbered 2000 and whatever. So this game, I assume, is what is considered like just 2000, Gunfight, that is. And then 2001 would have made ZZ Zap the first game released, followed by Seawolf, and then Red Baron, and so on. The 4000 series, I believe, is meant to be educational games. You see here we have Speed Math, and here we have Letter Match and Spell and Score. So again, I could not find any reference to these numbering systems anywhere on the internet. So I cannot confirm with 100% certainty that what I'm saying here is accurate, but every 4,000 numbered game, and there's only one or two more beyond that first 4,001. Yeah, here you have Biorhythm, which is the same idea as that. Was it the exact same name on the RCA Studio 2 had a very nearly identical thing. So there's very few of these, but you've got that, and then you have the 3000 series, which is sports games. So here's 3001, here's 3002, 3005 here. I don't know where. So the other thing you're going to find is that a lot of these numbers are missing. But because here's 3002, here's 3005. No reference of another 3000 anywhere on this system. So don't know what happened to the remaining 3000 series titles, but maybe they are counting each one of these as its own number, but then why is this 3002? I don't know. Anyway. And then finally we have the 5000 series games, and those I'm honestly not 100% sure what they are meant to indicate here. Like, this one is maze and tic-tac-toe. Then you have blackjack and poker and acey-deucey. And then the only other one I saw here is artillery duel. And that's it. So I'm really not sure what connects those games that makes them a 5000 series title instead of a 2000 series title. My guess is that they're meant to be more like of puzzle or board style games and less action arcade style games. But I couldn't come up with a simple explanation of what the 5000 series is meant to be. But that's the numbering scheme. So the numbering of the 2000 series, which is far and away the most, goes up to about 20, I believe. Yeah. Looks like 2019 here is the highest level one. You'll also see after Bally sold the rights to the system here, a lot of these later cartridges were either unlicensed entirely or might have been licensed, but were not necessarily using the same art and numbering scheme that Bally was using when they owned the system. So you'll see several of these Spectrocade boxes, and even some that don't have the box will in fact still come from this manufacturer. Why will this not update? So this Spectre Systems, as you can see, made a number of different titles, and so you can see all of their games say Spectrocade on them. Which means that this game actually had third-party developers working on it, which makes that, again, outside of the 2600, the only example of that from a 70s game console. So that's also pretty noteworthy. But I think that is enough yapping about the system itself. Let's take a look at the pack-in games and software. The Astrocade does not have any dedicated emulators. The only real working emulation option is actually MAME, because the Astrocade uses the same hardware in a lot of cases as Midway's own arcade titles of the time. So you don't really need your own dedicated emulator for this. If you run MAME, it can run this because it is just gonna run all of the same stuff it's running for any of these games in an arcade. So pretty much every game for the Bally Astrocade begins with a menu that looks like this. with the available games listed here. And if there is a cartridge inserted, the cartridge games will be at the top, so it'll be 1 and 2, but you'll still see these 4 options here beneath that because this was built in. So you always could select these as an optional playable thing. We're not going to look at scribbling and calculator because those aren't video games, but they are here. You can select them. We'll look at checkmate. And so here we get enter number of games. Let's go with, 3. Okay, fine, 30. 1 player. And I'm the bottom. Nope, am I not the bottom? I thought I was the bottom. This is too loud for me. Hold on. Look at the volume for you as well as they are doing this. Yeah, this is too loud. All right. We have turned the volume down dramatically on this stuff. Okay, which character am I? We're going to let this restart, and then we should be actually ready to play, hopefully. So I should be the player on the left here. Okay, yes. So I'm the left-hand player. And if you've never seen a game like this, the idea is just to be the last player to crash. These games were inspired by the light cycle sequence from Tron. And so you can't go over your own lines, you can't hit into any of the enemy lines, and so he beat me. I didn't turn fast enough. So you'd find games of this sort on quite a few different platforms of the era. This is one of the earliest ones, but there are plenty more. There's even a actual licensed one from Tron on the Intellivision. And of course, whoops. There is a version on the Atari and on a handful of other systems, but they're all more or less this. This one is perfectly fine, but they're all more or less this. Uh-oh, I hit the wrong button. All right, and now we'll take a look at Gunfight. Score can be, let's call it 100. How do you, okay, there you go. Unfortunately, this version of Gunfight is only 1 player. I mean, I'm pretty sure every version of Gunfight I've ever seen is 1 player, but this one is definitely. I wonder if you could somehow use the knob to aim your gun. Yes, success. Okay. All right, so that's Gunfight. Obviously, it is much better with 2 players, but In fact, it's more or less nothing without 2 players, but, you know, it is what it is. Now, the way I'm controlling this is using left analog stick to move, right analog stick to aim, and then I can use either the right bumper, right trigger, or A button to shoot, depending on if I need to have my right thumb aiming, I can use a shoulder button, and I don't need to use the A button. So, now that we've made this playable, I would need an opponent to actually play it. And I don't have one of those. So, that's then gonna be Gunfight and Checkmate, the built-in games. And so I think that's what we're gonna do for today. So if you're watching this on YouTube, this is all going to be just a single video. So, you know, a couple seconds from now, you will see me having returned tomorrow to do the rest. If you are watching this live on Twitch, I will be back tomorrow evening and we will look at all of the non-built-in games. So please join us for that. And if you're on YouTube, hold on just a second. We will be back with the rest of the games. If you are watching this on YouTube, it probably looks like mere seconds have passed since we looked at Gunfight, Checkmate, Calculator, and Doodle, but in fact it has been a full day. We are now here again the following day, and we are going to be looking at the games released on cartridge now. So there are about 30 titles here to look at. So we are going to look at, as stated, every single one of them. And we are going to go in release date order to an extent. As mentioned earlier, the games are in fact all numbered up to a point. So we are just going to go in number order, so 1s, then 2s, then 3s, and so on. So we'll do 2001, then 3001, then 4001, then 2002, 3002, 4002, and so on and so forth within the same year, and then do the same thing for each year. That's not going to probably be the exact release date order because there's no guarantee that they didn't release, 2001, 2002, and 2003 all at once, and then release 4001 and 2, but finding exact dates for each of these releases is going to be borderline impossible, so that's how we're going to order it. And that should get us fairly close, hopefully, to the actual release order of these games. So that means 2001 here is our first game, which is 2080 Zap and Dodge 'em. So let us switch over to the game itself. All right, let me move this here, and we press 1 to play 280 ZZ Zap. Race time can be, I don't know, 5 minutes. It's way too long for a race time. Let's see. Oh no. So, as you might be able to tell just by looking at this, this is a copy of Atari's Night Driver, which was a launch game just a couple of months prior for the 2600. This is not, to my knowledge, this was never an arcade game. I'm pretty sure this, or I think Atari might have brought it to the arcades afterwards, but I'm fair, this controls terribly. Nothing I'm doing is, can we... Do I need to use... Hold on. Ah, that's why. I'm using the wrong stick. They want me to use the rotating dial, not the analog stick. This makes much more sense now. In fact, this is now almost too easy. gives you a sense of how much better for some of these games a rotating dial is than a joystick. And with the Bally Astrocade, you don't have to buy a separate rotating dial. You have both on the same controller. Of course, you also had paid over $100 more for the system itself, so whether or not that is a worthwhile exchange, you'll have to tell me. I'll say that this looks no better, really, than the 2600 version. It might sound a tiny bit better due to there's some reverb here, and this thing can make more than one sound at a time, so I'm gonna say it sounds a wee bit better than the Atari 2600 version. It still sounds terrible, but compared to what we heard on the RCA Studio 2 and what the 2600 was capable of producing, this is not bad. If I hit 2, does that actually immediately take us to the next game? Nope. All right. 2 is Dodgem. Let's make the race time 2 minutes, so maybe we can actually finish it this time. Okay, so this is... Oh, sorry. I'm using the wrong control mechanisms again. This is the same thing, more or less, except from a top-down view. This would have been called, I believe, Highway on the 2600. It might have actually even been called Dodgem. No. I feel like Dodgem... I think Dodgem on the 2600 was actually a conversion of Sega's head-on, so I don't think Dodgem on the 2600 was this, but there was this game on the 2600. There was also this game on the Studio 2. It was one of the built-in games. I think it was called Highway there, or maybe Speedway, that we couldn't play. And I don't think we saw one of these on the Fairchild, actually, but this genre had existed in arcades since the early 1970s. This is one of the first types of video games, is driving down a freeway and dodging incoming traffic. So we will see this exact concept appear on numerous different platforms that all more or less look like this. This one at least has color, which is more than the Studio 2 one, and I'm pretty sure more than the Atari one did. I think those were both black and white, and certainly the arcade cabinets from the early 70s were black and white. So now, mind you, I'm not sure that I think these chosen colors make the game more appealing than a black and white cabinet would. I probably would have personally gone with a black background to, you know, emulate a road, and had the the red and yellow cars on top of a black road, but making the whole game fuchsia is certainly a choice. Yay? Okay, I'm gonna assume we won. So those are both incredibly basic arcade racing games that are both, again, ripped off directly from an Atari game that already existed. I think we've heard this story plenty of times, and we will continue hearing this story plenty of times, although as we get on, we'll start hearing it more about Japanese companies in addition to Atari. All right, so that would bring us up to 3001, which is Tornado Baseball. So let us switch over to that. All right. Well, this looks more like a game of baseball than... Okay. So this is using the rotator dial. That's me pitching. I don't have anything set up to be player 2, and this is clearly a 2-player only game, so we're just going to strike out the non-existent player 2 here. And then we can be the batter. And we'll see how that works. It occurs to me they're never going to pitch to me, so it's not going to work at all, is it? Well, not much we can do here. All right. That looks to be a more potentially complex version of a baseball. All right, handball, we're still not going to be able to play, so let's just go straight to hockey here. And this, we have a number of players as an option, so... All right, what do we got here? So interesting options here. So using the analog, the joystick, we can move our players forward and backwards here along the field. And then using the rotator dial, we can move their position up and down on screen. So to the left and right of the field. And then the buttons in this case do nothing. So this one is going to be very, very hard to control because it is going to auto center or I wonder if MAME can account for that. Hold on. See, I assume if I turn this up, yeah, then this just really rapidly, okay. So no, does not look like I can, in fact, cause it not to auto-center. This has been an issue with many of the paddle game adaptations we've seen on various emulators for platforms like this from this era, in that our joysticks today auto-center. And so, because of that, it makes a lot of these games virtually unplayable. We're gonna move on to the next game because, as I said, it is virtually unplayable. But that is not the fault of the game. That's the fault of me not having a paddle controller. So, all right. This one, again, I can go back and forth. And why does it give me an option to do one player if it's not going to give me AI to play against? Like, what would be the difference if I chose 2-player here? But yeah, I can, again, move forward and back using the analog stick and go up and down using the rotating dial. So once again, not an especially playable game because of that, using a modern controller. It feels like you should be able to correct for this. And maybe you wouldn't want to. I don't know why you wouldn't want to, though. But it seems like you should be able to... I don't know. Like, maybe the answer is actually I should have set the movement to the mouse. I don't know, but you get the idea. It's Pong, but they've done a bit to the visuals to actually make it look more like an actual sport, and I can move my player back and forth as I could move my paddle back and forth. I don't think there's any really valid reason why they needed to use the dial here at all. They could have just used the analog stick, but I guess the dial would give a lot finer control. That said, turning the dial while simultaneously rocking it back and forth is a difficult maneuver. Like, anyone who's played Ikari Warriors in arcades has had to do that, and it's not easy. So I don't know that this would control very well. I've never played this game on this actual system with this actual controller, so it's hard to say for certain. But using a rotator dial that is also an analog stick is an inherently difficult thing to do, just because you're moving your hands in ways that you would not expect. So I'm not 100% sure this would be more successful than Fairchild's versions of the games. And I think definitely their single player mode was squash. So it was just a line and you were just trying to bounce the ball off of, the wall, but it was just a line on the other side of the screen. So it was a better single player game, definitely. And it was probably overall a better game, and using their rotator dial to create English on the ball to create a spin, I think is a much smarter way to have gone about this than what Bally has done here. So I'm going to give the sports lineup here to Fairchild, with the exception of the fact that you had to buy baseball separately on Fairchild. That was its own cartridge. Here you had them both in one. So that's nice, but I don't think any of... Well, we couldn't even get the Fairchild baseball game to work, so it's hard to say what that would have been. But the versions of hockey and tennis on here, I don't feel were as good as Fairchild's versions. They certainly looked more like the actual sport. They used actual sprites for the characters because this system was not limited to simple shapes. So visually, it was definitely superior. And it is superior to the baseball and Pong games that were available probably on the 2600 at the time, because certainly for the Pong games, because you could not use both the joystick and the spinner dial simultaneously. And you only had the one button, so you couldn't even really move backwards and forwards along the field on the 2600. That was something that would have had to have been only on either the Fairchild or on this platform. So there were some advantages here, but I think overall the Channel F game is right now being the winner. So that means our next game is, oh no, it's another math game. All right, we're gonna look at this very, very quickly. Why did I hit that button? That's not gonna do anything. Speed Math is the name of this game. Hold on, Speed Math. Speed Math. Okay. All right, and we are going to hit 1 for Speed Math. Add, subtract, multiply, divide, mix. Select one. How do I make a selection? Oh, I make the selection by hitting that number on the actual... I bet I just use the keypad to control this. Is that correct? 7 plus blank equals 9. 2, yeah. No, I just use the keypad. It's 2 again. It's all still 2. It is 6. It is 7. It is 5. We're doing great. 2. A lot of the answers here are 2. I had to price multiple numbers there. That was insane. 0. 6. Yeah, that's the same problem, just written differently. 7. 14. 15. 3. Again, same problem, written differently. Same. This is not great. They really need to stop giving me the same problem with different parts of the problem. Select up or down. What do I have as up or down? What does that even mean? Oh, I don't know what I put as upper. I don't know what I have set as that. And honestly, we don't need to play anymore. You get it. That's speed math. There's also, hold on, bingo math. Let's quickly look at this. Um, 5 plus 1 equals 6. 7 plus 2 equals 9. 5. 9 plus 4. Do I have a... Here, this would be a good 4 to use. 9 plus 2. We're very close to winning. I guess we'll have to go here. I don't think there's any other 5s. 9. Sure. 5 plus 0. And 3. And 8. Wait. Bingo. I win. I'm good. Okay. That's their version of a math game. It's the same as the other math games, guys. I don't know. It's addition and subtraction. What do you want me to say? Their version of bingo means that you input the numbers very slightly differently, having a tiny bit more of a game to it. So maybe I'd give them a very, very slight edge over Fairchild and RCA with that. Also, you get all of that in a single cartridge and don't have to buy multiple cartridges in the same way you did in Fairchild. So I guess they can be seen as the winner of the math game contest. All right, that's the 01s. 02s begin with Seawolf and Missile. So was it the Studio 2 that had this? I'm pretty sure it was the Studio 2 that had Seawolf. And I spent the whole time trying to remember if it was in fact a clone of Seawolf, and playing this will tell us that in fact it was a clone of Seawolf. Let's go for a minute. This demands an analog solution, it seems. So will not let me use the D-pad to do this. All right, well, that's Seawolf. And here is the same game, but with planes. So once again, the reverb on the sound effects here, this is much harder than on the Fairchild. Because on the Fairchild one, you could aim the missile by moving back and forth. I wonder if I can... okay. I can, in fact, aim the missile. Never mind. I just aim the missile using the analog stick, not the... Okay. Never mind. I was gonna say, did Fairchild beat this out? Despite being a much uglier game and a much worse sounding game. Yeah, not this sounds good, but by comparison, the vibrato, the reverb you're getting here, makes these things sound significantly more accurate than they would otherwise. So that's Missile and Seawolf, and that means we are up to football. They included baseball and hockey and all that into a single cartridge, but football, that you have to pay extra for. I don't know that we've gotten a version of football to actually work so far, so... And once again, it requires 2 players, so let's just see what it looks like. We've got actual music there. Sure. Well, how do I select? I see. Well, that was not what I needed to do. I have no idea what I am. This at least looks something like football. I have no idea how I'm selecting this. It just seems like, unless they're selecting it, maybe I'm not on, maybe I'm on defense right now. No idea. All right. That was football. Again, unfortunately, no CPU opponent, so we couldn't really play it. Next up is letter match. It's, I mean, I'm pretty sure it's going to be memory again, but let's give it a shot and find out. So we're going to pick a square. U and O, T and Y. Y's are right next to each other. Success. These sounds are so terrible. V. R. Is that what this was? Yeah. We did R, M, another R. Another R. With the... a J, a T. A V, that is there. I don't think we've seen a C yet, or a G. Another V. Another O. Another V, uh-oh. Where was the V? We just saw it. Was it here? Nope. Nope. There it was. Luckily, there seems to be no turn limit. I can speak. J. Have we seen J We definitely haven't seen an A. Another V? A G was... Nope, that was J and T. That was I. Oh, okay. I wasn't even trying to do that. Nope. It's an M. No, that's a T. That's the other M. That's the T. Oh, man. Was this the T? No, that was the G. Was this the T? These sounds are terrible. Winner is... Who is the winner? Am I the winner? I guess I'm the winner. All right. That's Letter Match. It's another version of memory. It sounds horrendous, so I'm going to call it the worst version of memory we've seen so far because I don't ever want to play it again because of how terrible it sounded. Maximum score 3 digits. 200. Number of players 1. What are we doing? I don't know what we're doing here. I still don't know what I have set to up and down. All right. We need to actually figure this out, huh? Page up and page down. That's just silly. Why would we have it set like that? Let's just put it to up and down. And then delete that, make this down, and make this up. Voila, problem solved. All right. So are we, okay. What is a, I mean, I assume we're just trying to spell words here then, right? Like, what's here? We're going to try that, see if, wait, how is that accepted? In that case, I have no idea what we're trying to do. That was just a random. Nope, don't understand this one at all then. Okay. Like, it keeps accepting it, but surely I'm not spelling these words right. Surely those are not actual words I was using there. Crosswords is our final title here, 1 player. Oh, mine's like trying to... I feel like we need a manual for this. I feel like there must be like a booklet here, like in the Studio 2 game that gives us questions for both this and the previous one, and that would make a lot more sense. Huh. Okay, I don't think we're going to be really able to look at those. I did not realize I would need a manual for one of these, or I would have downloaded it. My apologies. That's okay, though. It's just a basic educational game, just like we've seen plenty of. All right, that gets us to the threes, and there is just 1 3 and 1 4. So that means we are up to Red Baron and Panzer Attack. So this is going to be, of course, combat. Let's see what Bally can do. So we turn up and down using the stick, and we increase and decrease our speed using the paddle. We fire with the fire button. Once again, despite setting this as being 1 player, it does not seem to care and has not given me AI. So I think Fairchild's won this one again, honestly, because their version had their version had AI. And in theory, the Z80 should be a more powerful processor than what was in the Fairchild Channel F, because that would have been a much earlier processor. So, interesting. Interesting. Okay. Let's see what Panzer Attack is like. What if we select 0 players? Nope, it will not let me select 0 players. Number of games, I don't know, 3. Okay, 35. Can I... No, this works like just like combat does. They did not use their rotary dial to give you the ability to aim and shoot in different directions. So we're going to say this is significantly worse than Fairchild's. Okay, yeah. No, Fairchild far and away wins this battle. You know, RCA still loses it. And Atari comes in second just due to the number of variants they have, like with bouncing balls and such, but yeah, Fairchild is the only one who actually let you use real tank controls. So they definitely win the day on here with the tank game and with the flight combat game, in that they have AI, which none of their competition does. So Fairchild taking a surprising lead as far as these consoles are concerned early on. This is yeah, it's not great, but it's fine. It does what you'd expect it to do. I think that's everything on here, right? Yeah. Okay. That means it is time for the final game of 78, which is Brickyard / Clowns. This is going to be Breakout and Circus. Two similar arcade games. Breakout, of course, is from Atari. Circus is from Sega, though, I believe. So copying not just Atari in this one. Let's go with intermediate. Number of players, 1. Number of balls, 3. Sorry, 35. This is going to be a paddle one again, so we're going to struggle here. Luckily, I gave myself 35 balls, so hopefully we should be okay. So thus far, no one has managed to actually make separate bricks that are visible for you to destroy in their version of Breakout outside of arcades. So can't say this one is any better or worse than the competition. This ball has a bit more actual physics to it. For better or worse, I don't know that that's necessarily a positive, but it's certainly different than the versions we've seen thus far. And again, discounting the fact that I don't have a paddle ball and so, or a roller ball or a paddle controller, or any sort of controller that would actually correctly emulate the experience of using this thing, this controls fine. Seems, or at the very least, it seems like it would control fine if I had the correct controller. And like I said, I do like that the ball has actual physics here. I guess my guess is it is because it is the same physics they are using for Circus. And they just didn't bother creating 2 sets of physics, one for Breakout and one for Circus. Which, I don't know. I think this would have been more interesting, I guess, as a package if Breakout and Circus controlled differently. We'll see in a moment if I'm correct about that assumption, I guess, but yeah, normally in Breakout, the ball doesn't have gravity affecting it like this. That's usually something you see in a Circus. It's kind of the difference between the two, so making it so that they both behave like that just kind of seems silly. I'm also not a huge fan in general of the incredibly garish colors that Bally is using here. Mind you, they're doing it to show off that they can. Remember that the Studio 2 is black and white. The Fairchild could produce color, but certainly nowhere near this many on screen at once. And the 2600 could produce way more colors than this, but rarely did because it took a significant amount of programming effort. So at this point in time, you would not have seen an Atari game producing this many colors on screen. So I'm sure this was to show off, and at the time, seeing all this color on screen would have been really impressive, and color TVs, you know, were just coming into the mainstream. Like, they had existed for, honestly, probably close to a decade at this point, but they were very expensive, so it would have been fairly rare to see them in the average home before this era. And so this would have been a good way to show off your new color TV. But it holds up very poorly, I think. Especially, again, if this was the color scheme used in Circus, I could accept that. Okay. Let us reset. Nope. Nope. When some of them let you just hit the one button and it takes you back to the select game screen, and some I have to reset the whole system. This one is one of the latter. Alrighty. Hold on, you guys not. This thing just keeps making crazy size changes. Number of clowns. Okay, so this is more or less the same game. It's maybe a bit more demanding, and you see now where I'm saying that these gravity physics seem like they were pulled from here. Because normally this type of gravity physics is the purview of Circus here, but they seem to have added it to their breakout game, which is weird. Whoops. Once again, these games are hard to play with a modern controller, so I can't say any version of this on any platform controls well on a modern controller. But once again, this feels like something that would likely have controlled fine on the original hardware. This feels similar to how the Atari version plays, and I've never actually played the Sega cabinet hardware. It was before my time, but I have played emulating. I've emulated it here in MAME, and so I can say that it plays like how that one emulates. So yeah, these are fine versions of this game. Its breakout game is maybe not the most accurate thing out there, but it's not bad. It's at least differentiates itself from all the other companies' breakout games. All right, so that's 1978. At this point, we are moving into 1979. That means we would have added another major competitor to the field at this point in the form of the Odyssey 2. So we've not looked at that yet, but keep in mind that at this point you would also have the Odyssey 2. You would have in Europe the various 1292 variants. The Interton VC4000, I believe, is the most famous one. I hope I got that name right. In Germany, but there were versions made by Grandstand in the UK and by several French companies as well. So throughout Europe, you could have had a variant of that. We'll be looking at that next, so we'll get to that. There's also the IPF MP1000 would have been released by this point. That only had a handful of games, so it's not really a major contender. Trying to think if there's anything else. There might have even been one or two more. So quite a few entrants into the field, but the only really noteworthy competitor would be the Odyssey 2. All right. So as you can see, in 1979, they introduced the 5000 series. And as mentioned earlier, I don't know what the 5000 series is meant to be, outside of the fact, like, we've got card games here, we've got maze and tic-tac-toe, which initially made me think that these were meant to be like board games. But then, again, as I said earlier, that's not really the case, because we also have Artillery Duel here, which I'm pretty sure is not a board game. And then also, all the way down here, these are not full releases. These are prototypes, but this was a prototype of Conan the Barbarian, and it has 5004. So I don't know what unites these 4 games in the 5000 series, but we'll start with them and find out what they're like. We've got Amazing Maze and Tic-Tac-Toe. Again, always important to note when playing a maze game, this is still pre-Pac-Man. Pac-Man was 1981. So Maze and Tic-Tac-Toe predated Pac-Man. Obviously, we saw maze games. I'm pretty sure we definitely saw it on Fairchild. Did we see one on the RCA? I think we did. And of course, there would have been ones on the 2600 as well. And enter the max score. I don't know. Okay. I'm ready. Is it building the maze? Oh, and it actually gave me a competitor this time. This is exciting. I've made a terrible error. This is not the way to go. Oh, nope. Well, the CPU beat me. So I will say that I'm very impressed that it has AI and it's building its own maze each time. Those are both really neat ideas. Nope. Isn't the right way. How did he get there? No! I made a wrong turn. Okay, this is cool. This is definitely way, way better than Fairchild's maze game, and I can't even remember RCA's maze game, so... if they had one, was not this good. So yeah, okay. Bally finally coming in with a win. Took them a year to get their footing, I guess, but definitely a improvement. All right, tic-tac-toe time. Let's see how not much better tic-tac-toe than the Fairchild, huh? It took a really long time to think when there was only one possible move remaining for it. Okay, it's playing very slightly better than Fairchild was, but it's still tic-tac-toe. All right. And then there is a blackjack and poker and acey-deucey. We're not going to play all of this. Let's just look at blackjack because the other systems all had blackjack, so we can compare it to their versions. Place bet. How do I do it? Okay, so I'm hitting directions on the analog stick to make my choices here. So wait, do I not have 21 there? Is that not, why would I not stand? What? I'm so confused. How come I can, what? Did I not go over there? Is it? I am confounded here. Are these all, I am playing blackjack, right? All right, hold on. We're going to reset this thing. What the hell is happening? I'm selecting 1 for blackjack. 1 player. Why are there... Okay. Here's how I'm reading this. I'm reading this as either I'm the black cards or I'm the red. Or potentially maybe, am I supposed to be the left and he's the right? Like, am I 13 and he's... Let's assume that. If that's the case, then we will hit. No, I think I'm the top and he's the bottom, right? Like, when I hit, it gave me the 9. Okay. Whoops. I don't know why I passed there. Why did it even let me do that? 18. That seems like a good place to stand. He had 17, so dealer stands on 17, so I win. Okay. That makes sense. I might be getting this. I have 11, so I need to hit. I have 12, right? So I need to hit again. I have 19. I need to stand. Yeah. All right. I have 7. Hit. What? Oh, is that a queen? I thought that was a 0. Which doesn't make sense now that I think about it. There's no 0 card, but that's what it looked like to me. My apologies. 12. We can hit that. We busted. Okay, I get it now. This is... I don't like the control on this one nearly as much, and it was a little bit confusing to grasp what the board was trying to tell me, but I'm sure it would have been clear if I had the manual. So better than the Fairchild one that I could not figure out how to play at all. More or less the same as RCA's. So nothing great, nothing terrible. That brings us now to the 2000s again with 2005 Star Battle. This is their take on Star Wars. We played the Fairchild version of this, which I want to say was also called Star Battle, and we saw the manual for the RCA one that has not been dumped, so it exists, but not something we could play. And there are several, I don't know, there's probably more than a dozen different 2600 games like this, so we will see how this one stacks up. All right. One player, 100 points, I guess. Let's see. How do we play this thing? Whoa. What? I'm really struggling to read this. Like, is there depth in this? I can't tell. This is like a cross between a trench run style game and something like Space War, it seems, which is interesting. That's unique. But the perspective here is nonsense. Yeah. It doesn't seem like, it seems like I can control this either with... Yeah. This is... Looks like I control either with analog stick movement or with paddleball movement. It doesn't seem to matter one way or the other. So I'm not sure what I'm not sure what they're trying to represent as far as depth is concerned here. Like, you know, going towards the top of the screen makes you smaller, which makes me think you're further away, but that's certainly not how it is portraying the actual combat here. So, I can't say with 100% certainty that I get what they're really going for here, honestly. Well, I get what they're going for. They're trying to give you a sense of forward perspective in a game like this, which had not been done up to this point. It just doesn't work. Your ship automatically fires in the direction of the enemy. If I'm on the top, I'm shooting down. If I'm the bottom, I'm shooting right or up. It does not matter at all what. This is another one that sounds terrible. Like, we've heard some really good sounds from this. We heard music that one time. So we know the system is capable of way more than this. So it's a shame that... Yeah, it's a shame that some games sound so bad, and this game just does not work. I get what they were going for here. Interesting mix of genres, but does not work. So, that's Space Battle. Unfortunate title. Definitely ambitious, but again, just not how you would want it. Next up then will be Bally Pinball. Let's see, how do we do the other flipper? So left flipper is the button. Nothing else seems to do anything. I'm just hitting the number keys there to see if that would do anything, but no. Do you need maybe 2 controllers to play this game? Okay, we're going to do something unprecedented in the history of this series and see if we can pull up the manual mid-stream. Okay, we have the manual up. Yeah, you need 2 controllers. Yeah, you need 2 controllers for this. This is the only game I've ever seen that requires 2 controllers. I don't have that set up. All right, well, I guess we're not going to be able to play pinball, unfortunately. That's too bad. Well, maybe we'll circle around back to this at some point in the future. Anyway, that is 2005 and 3005. You'll notice next is 2009. What happened to 6, 7, and 8? I have no idea. I have no idea. Like, it just goes on from 9 to 10 here, 11, and 14, and 12, and like, I don't know what happened to 6, 7, and 8. I could not find any reference to the games that were numbered 2006, 7, or 8, so maybe they never came out? I'm not really sure. But this is 2009 Astro Battle. Let us get that started. Astro Battle. Astro Battle. We'll play medium difficulty, and this is Space Invaders. In fact, it was originally released as Space Invaders, but Atari had the exclusive home console rights to Space Invaders, and so they sued, and Midway was forced to rename their game. Nope. But one of the secrets, yeah, you'll find when it comes to this generation is it's not necessarily that the Atari had the best versions of any of these games. Not that its version of Space Invaders was bad, mind you, but it was certainly no better than this. The key difference was that it had the name Space Invaders. And that was the case for a lot of very popular games. You know, we will not see an official version of Pac-Man on this because Atari had the exclusive rights. And so the key advantage Atari had over the competition, especially by this point, was that they were owned by Warner Brothers. They had a very large multinational company as their backer that was able to swoop in and buy the rights to these cabinets before the competition could. And so, whoa. And so, you know, like, the version of Space Invaders we saw on the Channel F was just not good, right? And we'll see some other bad versions going forward. But this version is perfectly fine. It definitely sounds a lot better than Atari's. Again, that reverb making its present felt very much so here. The explosions on this system just sound so much better than on the 2600. And this one controls well. It seems to be pretty decently balanced. It's maybe a bit easier than the arcade, but fairly close, I would say, to the Atari. Let's try playing it on the hardest difficulty. Let's see if that brings it more on to, yeah, okay. This brings it more onto the arcade level of difficulty. Like, this may even be a bit harder than the arcade. That is a lot of fire coming down at you right away, so yeah. No, this is... We are now at the point where it is probably harder than the arcade version, so... Okay, so a good set of difficulty options ranging from, it seems, a fair bit easier than the arcade to being a fair bit harder than the arcade. So, yeah, definitely a very cool version of Space Invaders that unfortunately could not be called Space Invaders. And there you see why Atari won this battle. It was entirely down to money and reach, thanks to the ownership by Warner Brothers. And yeah, their version of Space Invaders is at most as good as that, probably not even quite as good. But it was called Space Invaders. And that made all the difference, to the extent that here in 1980, Bally released one game, Dog Patch. I'm not even 100% sure what this game is, but we'll take a look at it and find out. Number of cans, 5? Okay, 50. Okay, how do I aim? Okay, there's another shooting gallery game. We've seen this on both of our previous episodes. This one gives it, again, a bit more of an audio-visual polish, but otherwise not really all that different. I will say that, so on the Studio 2, if you recall, in their target shooting game, you could move the bullets after firing them because they didn't have any way to have you fine-tune your aim. Here, and in Fairchild's version, you could adjust your aim. And this one gives you probably the best control over your aim so far with that dial. And it actually works pretty well. Here, I feel like I'm doing significantly better with this than I was with either RCA's or Fairchild's game. This also seems like one that would be pretty fun if you had two people, like if someone else was also trying to shoot it and we were, you know, basically volleying back and forth. That seems like that would be a pretty fun time. I won. Against nobody. Okay, yeah, that is actually a fairly impressive entry in that genre. Definitely the best one we have seen so far. Okay, this brings us to 1981, which is the final year that Bally ran Midway and ran this division, after which they would sell them off. So we have here another 4 games. These two are the same game. I actually just put them both here so that you could see what I was talking about. So this is another case where it was released as Galaxian, and Atari had the exclusive rights, and so it was then released as Galactic Invasion instead. So, same exact game, but two different names, same number cartridge and everything. All right, but before we do that, we have another biorhythm game. I don't know why multiple companies released this. This is nonsense. But okay, let's take a look at how do I type my name in? Oh, that's too much. We're just gonna be A. Oh, this is hard to control. Okay, we're just month 0 7 day the 16th, the year 19 60. Oops, nope. 0 7. Can I type this using the actual? Yes, I can. Except I need to go back because I typed a this makes way more sense. I don't know why I didn't think of doing this like that. Yay. I'm so excited. It's another biorhythm chart. All right, now that we've done that, it's time for the video games again, starting with a Galactic Invasion. All right, Galactic Invasion, skill level, 2, 3, 1. Well, this does not sound good. And it looks better than Atari's version, I'll say that much. But certainly is nothing compared to the arcade. You know, it's interesting. Galaxian only came out a let's try a skill level of 1 and 4 and 1. I don't know. What was I saying? Oh yeah, like Galaxian only came out about a year and a half, I want to say, after Space Invaders. But it was such a massive leap presentationally and in having all these, you know, moving ships and all these additional sound effects. And so it's interesting how much more able a system like this is able to capture the feel of Space Invaders, but is just failing miserably, honestly, primarily due to the sound at capturing Galaxian. Like, this sounds terrible. It's going to be interesting when we get to the systems released in this in the 80s. Once we get to like the Intellivision and ColecoVision and even Bandai's system had like 3 of its 5 games or something like that, maybe even more. Like 4 of its 5 games were just copies of Galaxian and Space Invaders and Galaga and the like. So I believe their Galaxian or maybe their Galaga game is even an officially licensed one. So it will be interesting to see how much better these systems released a couple of years later are able to do with this concept, because this one, while it plays fine, it just looks and sounds bad. Like, primarily the sound. If like, these looks certainly are not anywhere close to the arcade level, but they're way better than anything that the 2600 produced or that the Fairchild could have produced. I mean, they didn't even try to do something like this on that. And I believe we'll see something on the Odyssey 2 that is meant to be somewhat like this. But yeah, that's Galactic Invasion. I'd play it more because it's fun. It just sounds horrendous. So that's too bad. It's too bad. All right, 2012 is Space Fortress. Let us see what this one. We'll give ourselves 4 bases again. We'll start with an intensity of 1. What is happening? Oh, I know this game. What is the name of this game in arcades? I feel like the ships move in the arcade version. Assuming this gets even faster and harder than this, this could be pretty fun. As it is, this is, I don't really feel in significant danger of losing. You know, I'm sure I could mess up and lose. There we go. Give me all sides at once. This is not getting harder. I'm pretty sure I only was selecting the starting intensity, not the overall difficulty. So one would assume after this long, this is the maximum intensity it gets to. Yeah, I'm gonna go with this is too easy. Maybe if there were diagonals added in, that could make it slightly more challenging. Like I said, in the arcade version, I'm pretty sure all the ships move. I don't remember even the name of this game in arcades. And it isn't exactly like this, but it's a game where you have ships flying in and you're trying to protect your base in the center from destruction, like... But the ships in that one are flying at you, I'm pretty sure, so you actually have to correctly aim. Here, I mean, it's just 4 directions. So... it's not like there's a significant amount of effort I need into fine-tuning my aim. I can just press in the general direction I want to hit and fire. You also are shooting quite rapidly, so it's not like I need to worry about shooting too soon or too late. I can just keep firing and... yeah. I'm gonna let them hit me so we can see. Nice explosion. Good work. System very good at its explosions. I will give it that. So that Space Fortress, that's a tough one. I was enjoying it. I just wish it got harder, I guess. Like I said, if the ships moved, or if there were ships coming out of the corners potentially that made you have to fine tune your aim a bit more, but just shooting in 4 directions without any wait time between your shots is just too easy. All right, and last up for 1981, we have a Grand Prix and Demolition Derby. Grand Prix is going to be a take on Sprint, and we'll see if Demolition Derby is potentially a take on Head-On. We will find out. Hold on. All right, we're going to assume that's 1, 2, or 3 players, hopefully. No? Okay, maybe those are tracks. We'll figure that out next time. Enter... Well, let's go with beginner. 2 laps? Sure. Okay, 22 laps. Okay, how do we... okay. It's weird-ish controls, but I get it. It's how most of these games controlled, so I can't really knock it. Once again, it's more colorful than the competition, which was primarily black and white. I've chosen way too many laps. Can we reset it? No. All right, we will reset the whole system. Let's see what Grand Prix 2 is. 1 player. Let's stick with that. This time we're going to choose 5 laps. I wonder if... Nope. Dial does not do anything in this case. I thought that might adjust the speed or something, but... does not look like it, nor does it look like we can adjust our gear to go faster. It looks like this is pretty much it. We'll try Pro for the final track and see if that makes the speed faster, potentially. But 3 tracks here, so that's not bad. Let's reset this and try track 3. 3, 1. Let's try Pro this time, and we'll go with 3 laps. See if this is any faster. Whoops. Getting the hang of these controls continues to be a challenge, but yes, this is a bit faster. So that seems to be the difference there. Mind you, it's not a big difference. I won. All right, let's see if Demolition Derby is potentially a version of Head-On. Number of points, let's go for 10. Where am I? What am I? So I'd say I'm the green one, but there are 2 green ones. I'm the green one whose wheels are not connected to the car. Can we? No. Okay. I don't know if we're on the same team, the 2 green, and we're trying to take out the purple, or if they could just only... No, looks like we are attempting to take each other out. Nope, that didn't work. There we go. I won. Okay, that's its own thing. That's actual Demolition Derby. I'm gonna, hold on, we'll Let's just do 5 points this time. So I like that you are actually backing up here. That's neat. That this is accurate to how Demolition Derby actually works. I did not expect that going into this. But you are generally trying to back into your opponents just like this. That's how you would receive points. So a head-on collision would generally be viewed as unsafe, and you would get disqualified for that. So, okay. That's actually a fairly realistic take on Demolition Derby for the era. And that brings us to the end of Bally's era controlling the Astrocade. And it would be at this point that it would actually become the Astrocade and not the Bally Professional Arcade. Which means here in 1982, we get into the third-party games to an extent. There's some... Yeah, none of these are now, as you can see, none of these games made by Bally. So, you can see they're still somewhat using the numbering system here in some cases, but you also have the games that Spectre made that do not use the numbering system at all. So we'll, I guess, start with that. So this is ICBM attack. So that would mean artillery duel is next. Will be a private. Player 2 will be a private. Fortunately, this is a 2-player only game, so, you know, there's only going to be so much we can do here. There doesn't seem to be a way to skip this, unfortunately. All right. Do we... Well, unfortunately, I think we've done all we can do now because there's no player 2. But this looks like artillery duel. There's the exact same game on the 2600, and it plays just like that. In fact, it doesn't play as well because it doesn't give you clear delineation between your power and your speed and all that. Like, that was actually a lot clearer in what you're doing than on the Atari game. So I actually would say that that's a slightly better version than the Atari one, but it is largely identical. That means that Pirates Chase here is next. I just don't think Artillery Duel is a very good game no matter what platform you're playing it on, so only so much you can do with a game that isn't good to begin with. Sure, 5. No? Okay, 50. Oh, no. Okay, good. 10. What are we doing here? I'm pretty sure they've... Oh, damn it. I'm pretty sure they've just made a version of Pac-Man here that sucks. With no maze and only one ghost. You know, the issue is that by this point in time, copyright laws were starting to catch up with game publishers, thanks to Atari's efforts. And so it was becoming more and more risky to... Did we not win there? Okay, we did. We just also died. It was becoming riskier and riskier to make just a raw copycat, even if you didn't use the name. Well... So courts had ruled, I believe by this point it would have been ruled, that mechanics could not be copyrighted. And so as long as you had your own visuals and the like, you were generally okay, but if you had something that was clearly the same game with minor variations, that would likely have still run afoul of the rules. And so you saw games that put a bit more effort in this era into differentiating themselves from the games they were copying. Certainly in the US and in Japan, that would definitely become the case sooner rather than later, but you know, in China you continue seeing copycat games of that sort to this day. But in the US and Japan, and especially in Japan at this point, actually, they've made a very, very strict copyright rulings regarding this stuff. And you can probably tell why after looking at through 3 of these videos at this point, how every game up to here in the 1980s has just been the same game with very, very minor differences, if any at all. I'll say this is not as good as Pac-Man. Not by a long shot. Okay, that's Pirate's Chase, aka Pac-Man. I was gonna see if I could see what ICBM attack looked like from this, but hard to say exactly. Anyway, next up is the Incredible Wizard, which is actually the Wizard of War in arcades. We will play it on medium, 1 player. Get ready, I'm ready. So this is their take on something like Berserk. Oh, there I am. Uh-oh. And this was a fairly successful arcade game for Midway in this era, so this was a key game to get. I don't know why they didn't use the name of Wizard of War, because Atari had clearly shown that you would get a lot more sales if you use the arcade game name. Oh no. Oh. I've been shot. Oh, I thought I had killed him. Maybe that's another one, hard to say. I think we're down to our last dude. No, I fired, damn it. So, I want to say the Arcadia has a version of this game, but this is definitely the first version of this game on my home console, and it's quite good. Definitely better than any of the home console versions of Berserk we had seen up to this point. We saw versions for the Channel F. I guess that's really it. But Atari had the official conversion, of course, but it is not good. In fact, it is notoriously bad. So this would have been pretty pleasant surprise. This is one of the better ports I've seen of an action arcade game from the era. So, thumbs up for The Incredible Wizard, thumbs down for Pirates Chase and Artillery Duel, and, you know, thumbs sideways for ICBM Attack because it doesn't seem to work. All right, that brings us to 1983. Now, before we start here, I want to bring up the game list because we are getting into the era where some of these will not actually be officially licensed now. So I just want to see. Yeah, ICBM Attack was, in fact, an unlicensed game. The Spectre games are not officially licensed. And then Blast Droid, Sneaky Snake, and Treasure Cove here are all also going to be unlicensed games. So, Miss Candyman, let's make sure, yes. Miss Candyman is an official title, though it is exceptionally rare. So, we will see if we think it is worth tracking down. Man, this one even has a title screen. We haven't seen that. One. Normal. Seem to have died already. This is another take on a Pac-Man style game. Here it looks like we are moving from one black dot to the other in a, let's say, incredibly not responsive manner. This is definitely worse than their previous attempt at a Pac-Man clone. This is very bad, in fact. Like, the idea is not bad, mind you. It's just that the controls are terrible. This character did not at all want to respond to my commands. Okay, that's Miss Candyman. Uh, we will do the two numbered games here in order, but we'll go through everything else first. We got Sea Devil here. This is from that same company. We'll see if this is any better than their first effort. I actually don't know which one came out first. They both came out in the same year. 1983 saw the crash of the video game market in North America, in large part due to these awful third-party games that suddenly started appearing. Like, am I... Okay. So this is... It's just an underwater themed version of Defender. That sounds horrendous. Can you hear that incredibly high-pitched beep? This is terrible sounding. It's also the worst performing game we have played on the system thus far. This is an embarrassingly awful take. I blew up for some reason, and we're not going to continue playing because the that beeping is insane. It's not good. All right, let's see if Treasure Cove functions or not. Yep, this one seems to work. One player. Number of divers, 5. Okay. Where are we? Who are we? Are we trying to get the money on the bottom without hitting into anything? That's a game type that existed in this era. No. Okay, what are we actually trying to do here? How do I get the other coins? How did I get that one coin? This was like a computer game from the era. I don't actually think this was an arcade game. Not that I remember. How do you get the coin? Are you serious? My feet touched it? Like, I can't go any... Do I need to go back up to put the money in? What am I dead for? Alright, well, that's Treasure Cove. I would not recommend that one. Let's see, that was Treasure Cove. We have Sneaky Snake from New Image. Let's see if this is a version of Snake. One player. Player one. Nope, it's a version of Centipede. That also makes sense. This version of Centipede does not look significantly better than Atari's version of Centipede. It does sound a little bit better, but... I can see why this would have been considered unlicensed, because they would not want to be sued for making an official conversion of Centipede, and this is pretty blatant. There's another case, though, where I think this is probably a better version of Centipede from a control standpoint. I actually feel like I'm doing a lot better here than I would have done than I normally do on the 2600 version, but it's not called Centipede. And, you know, I can't really blame Atari for not choosing, whoops, I hit into a mushroom, for bringing their own game. You know, they clearly didn't want to bring their own game to a competing platform. That's fine. That's, you know. It's not like Sony and Nintendo do that. You know, Microsoft obviously does these days, but it's not like that is the common thing, to bring your game to your rivals' platforms. I think Microsoft has shown that that can work potentially, but mind you, on the same token, the Xbox is selling terribly, so maybe it doesn't. It works for what Microsoft is attempting to do, which is very much not... They are not trying to sell game consoles. They are trying to sell an ecosystem. They are trying to sell a brand. They do not care whether you buy their box or not, as long as they get you into the Microsoft ecosystem. How they do that is inconsequential to them. So, for their long-term goals, it works. But I can't blame companies actually trying to sell consoles for not doing that. Anyways, our last unlicensed game here is Blast Droids. Let's see if this is, in fact, a take on Berserk. No, we'll go with the one game, one player. Sector 1, Droids 8. This really looks kind of... No, this is its own thing. Nope, it's asteroids. Yeah, I would call this closer to asteroids. You know, I was debating, so when I was making a list of clones of Berserk, and I saw this and I didn't know whether or not to include it. There's no way to restart here even. Okay, well, that sucks. But, no, that's actually a clone of Asteroids, not of Berserk. Good to know. All right. Then our two licensed games here are, well, Miss Candyman was licensed, and were any of these others? Let's see. We said Blastoise, Sneaky Snake, and Treasure Cove were not. So Sea Devil was? Yes. Miss Candyman and Sea Devil were, in fact, the official licensed games. They just are really bad. From the Bit Fiddlers here. Let's see. We've got 218 here and 219. Let us see what they are like. Solar Conquest is first. Sorry, Solar Conqueror. Let's see what this is a ripoff of. Solar Conqueror, 1 player. 5. Enter System 1. Are we controlling anything here? It doesn't look like it. I think it's just a cutscene. Nice. Okay, I can't say I've ever seen a game like this. This is actually... I'm pretty sure this is an original idea. I don't think I've ever played a game of this sort. Certainly not with this, like, hook of going from one planet to the next like this. That seems to be a unique idea here. Whoa. Whoops. Some of this stuff sounds really bad still. And it doesn't, the shooting itself, unfortunately, doesn't control very well. Oh my. Sounds, man. They're real bad. We know the system is capable of better explosions. We've seen it happen before. But, hey, an actual original concept. That's unique. That's the first one of those we've seen. And it was a pretty good concept, too. If the shooting controlled better, I would say it would have been very successful. All right, and Cosmic Raiders is our other title. 1 player. Let's go with 3. Good luck. Okay. Entering Sector 1. Oh, is this another Defender ripoff? Well. Let's go with... think we won. Well, there's no hostages to rescue. So it's just Defender without hostages, it looks like. Like, I'm still shooting ships down here. Is this something I want? Yes, that's a shield. That works. So once again, this sounds horrendous. I don't know how some developers are having so much issue with what is a decently capable sound piece of hardware, but clearly they are. I do think I'm supposed to hit those missiles before they hit the ground. I don't know if I'll, like, lose a life if they do, or if it's just worth a lot of points to stop. Oh, I messed that up. But yeah, the audio here is really bad. Game over. All right. But beyond the audio being really bad, that was a solid Defender clone. So, two decent titles with awful audio, but certainly better than the unlicensed games by quite a large margin, and fairly impressive quality of gameplay and visuals for a system from 1978 all the way in 1983. That's not a bad look. All right, we are at that point. That is all of the both officially and unofficially released titles made during the lifespan of the system. The remaining 4 games we have here are prototypes. They are Conan the Barbarian, Maze Man, Soccer, and bowling I'm really not sure about. I put this here so that we would see that it existed, but it's not even listed on most of the lists I could find of games for the system. So I don't know where it came from, to be honest. But let's see, is it even in, yeah, okay, it is also a prototype, it looks like. So yeah, so all 4 of these games are unreleased prototypes. We'll start with Maze Man here. I don't know why these are listed as either 84 or 85, because they're not released. They were just prototypes, so who knows? Maybe this is when they became, you know, aware of them. I don't know. This is, of course, meant to be some sort of Pac-Man clone that they were working on. That's funny. They, like, literally, hold on, let me switch this so you can see here. They literally say enter number of Pac-Man. Seems they had not gotten any audio in yet. So again, unfinished game here. So no audio. Right now, you just stop when you stop pressing a direction. You don't have any forward momentum. So that's very different than standard Pac-Man. I don't know if that was going to be something they added later, or if that was meant to be a differentiator here. It's not a good one if it is. But looking at what they have here, you know, if they had actually added sound effects and potentially added the correct movement to this, this would have been a better version of Pac-Man than Atari's official version of Pac-Man. Because already this seems to be the I might even say this is better already. It certainly feels a lot better to control, but again, part of that is that you don't have any momentum, so it's significantly easier, and it's too easy because of that. Like, look at how easily I am beating this version of Pac-Man. So, it's not right, but considering how responsive it is, how smooth it's playing, how much better it looks than Atari's official conversion, I have to say that a completed version would all but certainly be the superior game. But considering that, again, they couldn't have called it Pac-Man, and I don't know, like, the only other difference outside of the fact that the ghosts are not, you know, ghosts, like, they look different. Assuming they were going to make the movement eventually work the same as in Pac-Man, the only real difference here to Pac-Man is that there are more power pellets, right? Like the maze, its layout is slightly different, and there are more power pellets on it. If is that enough for a court to say that that's not copyright infringement? I don't know. And I have a feeling this was never released because they didn't know. Because this is really, really damn close to Pac-Man. And if they didn't change the movement to make it Pac-Man-like, this would just be boring and way too easy and not worth playing. So I think they were screwed if they did change it, screwed if they didn't, and so they decided to cut their losses and run. That's what I would have done in their situation too, mind you, because this is too close. Oh. But there you go. That's Maze Man is our first one. Then we have, well, this actually is numbered, so I guess we'll do that last. I don't think we're going to look at bowling because I'm not 100% sure how, yeah, but we'll look at soccer. So again, unreleased prototype here, so they do seem to have a computer versus player option here. Sure. Sure. So what is the knob meant to do here? Does it have a... Nope. Let's see. So I can use the knob, it looks like, to aim my shot a little. Yeah. That's... This is actually really highly impressive for the time. If, especially if they had managed to finish this, this would have been crazily impressive. I'm actually surprised this was not released, because this even seems to exceed the quality of like the Intellivision soccer game, which would have been, you know, easily the best of the era. Damn it, missed. Yeah, it's crazy that this man, he stole the ball from me right as I was gonna kick it. But yeah, I mean, they have a significant number of the rules of soccer here. Like, there's no, like, offsides or anything as far as I can tell. But beyond that, man. Man. Whoops. Well, that was just dumb of me. Hey, I actually scored. This is great. But yeah, having all these options, like, this is shockingly in-depth for a prototype. And I think it would have been hugely successful if it was released. I'm surprised it was not. Yeah, that's really cool. Okay. I don't know, like, that looks more or less finished, so I'm surprised it was not put out. I mean, it looks like it was. Like, look at this. Looks like a sold game here. Like, there's pricing on this. So maybe this was put out? Like, it is listed as a prototype in the Wikipedia article on it, but this looks certainly like an actual cartridge in a box. So, interesting. If it was released, then this is really cool. This is really, really neat. All right, so our last prototype is Conan the Barbarian. And again, this is not necessarily finished. This one definitely does not feel finished. But that said, this is really neat. If it had been, like, you have stamina, you have strength, you're using the um you're using the dial to swing your sword. I'm using the button to change directions, and then I'm attacking like that. I think I was killed. Yeah, like, change directions here. That swing sword is me moving the... There we go. So it looks like you're, like, trying to hit the dots there on them. Yeah, okay. This actually controls not terribly. I'm getting levels, like, getting stronger, and yeah. Again, like, clearly not done. Like, more work could certainly have been done on this to get it up to a playable standard. And there needs to be more to it. Okay. Like, this is maybe a bit too basic for the 1980s. This would have been insanely impressive in the late 70s, but by, you know, this is dated 1983, but or 1985, but let's assume it was meant to come out in 83 or 84. But even at that point, that would have been a little bit dated. But the swordplay here is really innovative and really cool, and it works. Like, I feel very much in control of what is happening here. So I'm really impressed with this, honestly. Ooh, okay, they got me. But yeah, with a bit more development time to refine those mechanics and maybe add a little bit more variety, like to the levels, you could have had something that was really, really neat there. So that is it. That is every game officially released for the Astrocade, every game unofficially released for the Astrocade, as well as 4 prototypes of games not released at all for the Astrocade. So a significantly larger library than we have looked at thus far. This is going to be an episode, you know, more than twice as long as any other episode we have done it to this point. And we've gone all the way from very simple titles in 1977 and 78 that mimic some of the earliest 2600 titles to some more advanced stuff as we moved into the 80s. And I think this system really came into its own here in the 80s. It managed to capture the essence of a lot of these more complex titles, Galaxian and Defender and Space Invaders to an extent. Like, it captured Space Invaders very well. I just think the Atari came pretty close to that as well. But Pac-Man maybe not so much, but we saw with Maze Man that it certainly could have if it had continued its life. Solar Conqueror and Cosmic Raiders here were both very impressive. Like, there's a lot of stuff here in this later area, Wizard of War, that really starts to separate it from what the 2600 was capable of doing. Certainly visually, the audio was very much a mixed bag in this era. They were certainly trying a lot, but I think they were pushing the system further than it should have been pushed. But overall, a pretty damn impressive showing for this later stuff. This early stuff is noteworthy for really not being as impressive in a lot of cases as what Fairchild or Atari were doing. In some cases, it was more or less even. Like Brickyard and Clowns here, Breakout and Circus, is not that dissimilar in quality to Atari's own Breakout and Circus, but it is as good at least, and you got them both in one game, so that's a positive. Same with like Dodge 'em and ZZ Zap, more or less as good as the Atari versions of the same games, but both in one package. So, you know, some fairly solid value to this stuff, even if the actual games weren't necessarily any better than the Atari ones. In some cases, they would have been slightly better, but I still think, like in the case of Red Baron and Panzer Attack and baseball, tennis, and hockey, the Fairchild versions were the most superior we have seen so far. But I would say that the issue is that one, on Atari, you would have had to buy all these games separately. And, well, no, Red Baron and Panzer Attack, that would have been air-sea battle. So you would have had those both. No, sorry, that would have been combat. You would have had both planes and tanks in combat. So you wouldn't have. And like I said, the Atari one had the bouncing balls and shooting off the screen. Like, there were a lot of variants that could make it more interesting. So I would say this is probably outside of the RCA Studio 2 game, the worst take on those we've seen. Uh, and as far as baseball, tennis, hockey, uh, I'd probably say it's also the worst take of those we've seen outside of the Studio 2. But a lot of the stuff was more or less the same. Seawolf and Missile, the math and spelling games, all that stuff were more or less identical to what we have seen on other platforms. And the maze game was certainly better than Fairchild's. Yeah, the pinball game, unfortunately, we couldn't play because it needed 2 controllers. But overall, a really, really impressive lineup. So probably overall, considering how many games were released going all the way to 1983 officially, I would probably say this is the best system we have looked at thus far, but certainly not an out of the park home run type scenario where it blows the competition out of the water, especially with these earlier titles. But definitely, let's put it this way, it's way better than the Studio 2. It's at least as good as the Fairchild. Certainly from an audio-visual standpoint, it's significantly better than the Fairchild. In fact, from a visual standpoint, this is easily the winner, hands down, so far. Higher resolution. Again, this looked like, well, it looked like in MAME when we were booting these up, it was running at that high resolution mode that you would have needed the RAM expansion to be able to actually see. But even considering that, just the details on the visuals were far greater than we saw on either the Studio 2 or the Fairchild, and greater than they were on the Atari. Everything was very colorful, very vibrant, in some cases a bit too much, and I wasn't a fan of it. But overall, Bally Astrocade, thumbs up. Like I said, next time we're either going to be looking, let's see, what are the official release dates here? Is it going to be the 1292 Pro, 1292 Advanced Programmable Video System? Just says 1978 here. Let's see if the Interton has an exact date. Nope, just 1978. So we have the Interton Video Computer 4000. What are the other names of this thing? Where is the UK one? In the UK, you had the Radifin or Astronic MPU 1000 or 2000. In you also had the Rotron television computer system. You had the ITMC Video Ordinateur in France. You had, again, the Interton VC4000 in Germany and other parts of Europe. Also in Germany, you had the Grundig Superplay computer. In Spain, you had the Pulson CX3000, the Auriac telecomputer, and the TRQ video computer. So all of those and more. The 1292 name was used by Radifin in Germany and Hanimex in Australia and New Zealand. So you also had Hanimex and Fountain also released a version of this called the Force 2 in Australia and New Zealand, and then Grandstand called theirs just the Advanced Programmable Video System. That's not even a full listing of all the different versions of this same identical system, but we will get more into it when we get there. I guess we'll probably do that next. Hard to say. It's also notable that there's the number of games released for the system is unclear because, again, there were well over a dozen different variations of it released all across the world. So which ones were officially released games In what regions, it's very hard to say. So we will do our best to play as many of them as possible, but there's probably somewhere around 60 games released for it. And yeah, but it's unclear exactly what that number is, and I'm not sure how many I'm going to be able to actually get working. So we'll give that a shot. The other system potentially we would look at, let's see if we have a date on this one, is the MP1000, I believe, is that his name? The ADFMP1000. October, okay, that has a date, and that date is late in the year, so no, we will do the APF, because then the Odyssey 2 was September. Okay, so that gives us our order for the 1978 systems there. It is going to be the 1292 next, followed by the MP1000, followed by the Odyssey 2. So we'll be looking at those over the course of the next month or so. So make sure you join us for our next episode when we will be looking at the 1292 and all of its variants. And then we will follow that up with the Odyssey 2. So thank you everyone who joined us today and who joined us yesterday for the first part of this episode. We will see you all tomorrow, not tomorrow, next week for the next episode. After the three systems from 1978, we have one 1979 release with the Bandai Supervision 8000, and then we move into systems from the 80s. Starting with the Intellivision, released, test marketed in 79, but released fully in 1980. So that will be our first 1980 system. That one's going to be we're not going to be able to look at every game for the Intellivision, probably. I wonder if I have a list of how many games there are. 132 official titles, so probably going to be more than we can look at, but we will choose a selection of those games and look at them, but we'll cross that bridge when we get there. So next up is the 1292. Next week, we will be back earlier than that to look at some CDI games early in the week next week. That is it, though, for our streaming for this week, everyone. Thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed this look at the Bally Astrocade, and we will return next week with more. Have a great night, everyone. Good evening. Goodbye.